The link to the story will be in the description. Dining with Divinity by Soul Reaper Crew.
Part 19, Lifting the Ladle from the Pot. Hestia brought it halfway to her lips when she stopped as a flash of yellow appeared out of the corner of her eye. After years of seeing the technique used, she recognized the user instantly, though was understandably confused why he was home so early. Turning to face him, she found out he wasn't alone, with Sally standing by his side along with Melano, though the mortal woman looked visibly confused as well as her niece. Her blonde bestie, however, looked visibly irritated. "What's going on? It's far too early for you to be home." She asked, "What about the customers?" "I'm equally as confused," Sally admitted. "One minute I'm serving customers, and the next thing I know, Naruto is ushering them out of the building and locking all the doors. It was all very sudden. He hasn't told me what's going on. I wouldn't mind an answer myself. You made me spill coffee down the front of my apron." She motioned to her apron with her hand rather dramatically. None of their questions got answered right away, though the three curiously followed him as he peeked his head into the living room. Inside, Talia and Percy were present, with Percy drawing a blue dinosaur while Talia watched television. "That was good. Naruto, what's going on?" The blonde shinobi turned to look at Hestia. "You haven't felt a new power signature arrive in New York recently?" He looked at Melano and asked the same question. Melano shook her head, and Hestia replied with a resounding, "No, nothing out of the ordinary." Beneath his breath, they heard him curse. "Damn, he's gotten better at hiding his energy." "Who has?" Naruto sighed and looked at Hestia. "Thor's in New York. He stopped by the Fox's Den about 10 minutes ago, but I managed to throw him in a trash can and teleport him to Switzerland. It should get him out of our hair for a little while." Hearing the God of Thunder's name, Hestia's eyes initially widened before her face dropped and a rare scowl appeared. "Oh joy. Back up a moment." Melano put her hands up, a look of panic on her face. "What do you mean Thor's in New York? I thought gods from other pantheons weren't meant to trespass on each other's turf." The last thing Mano wanted to witness was the famed God of Thunder duking it out with gods of her pantheon. "Why is he here? And you put him in a bin?" "In Switzerland. I have an idea why he's here." The tone of disapproval was evident in Hestia's voice, so much so she almost sounded like Hera. "He's here because he wants a fight, doesn't he?" Naruto nodded and sighed. "Yeah." The next thing he knew, he felt Hestia slapping his arm repeatedly. "Ow. Quit it. I told you centuries ago it was a bad idea to let Thor goad you into a fight, but you had to let him get under your skin." It went on for a few more seconds before Hestia relented, though her stern expression didn't leave. "Does he know this address?" "I don't think so. To be honest, I was more focused on getting him out of the city than asking 20 questions. Thor isn't the subtle kind, and I don't need your brother or any of the others knowing he's in the city without the permission of Olympus." Hold on. The three immortals turned and looked towards Sally, whose arms were in the air, a look of panic and disbelief written all over her face. "Thor, as in the Norse god of thunder, son of Odin and Frigga, an Aesir god. Do you know anyone else by that name?" Melano asked, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed. But they're real too. I thought it was only the Greeks that were real." The goddess of ghosts turned her head to look at the older pair with an eyebrow raised. "You never told her about the other pantheons?" "We may have skipped over a few details," Naruto admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "It was a conversation we were going to have for a later date," Hestia revealed. "Given New York is under Olympian jurisdiction, the gods from other pantheons have to inform us when they'll be stopping by. It doesn't happen often, so we didn't see the need for that topic to be brought up yet. Then again, we didn't take Thor's idiocy into account." "Do you know him well?" Melano asked, but quickly went silent at the irritated aura she could feel around her. It didn't look like the goddess of the hearth was the biggest fan of the Norse god of thunder. "Aunt Hestia." They all heard and watched as Talia appeared through the doorway. The 9-year-old stopped and stared at the 4 adults huddled together in the hallway. "Uncle, when did you get back? I didn't hear you get home." The TV remote was still in her hand, and behind her, Percy followed after his cousin. A big smile lit his face when he spotted Sally and was quickly moved around the older demigod, and clutch his mother's legs. "Hi, Mama." Sally smiled, picking him up and placing him on her hip. "Hello, Percy." Her face looked a little pale. She tried not to give away that anything was wrong and put on a brave face for the kids. "We just got back," Naruto replied to Talia's question. "Is something the matter?" "There's some weird guy outside running up and down the street waving a hammer around," Talia revealed, making the four adults look at each other. "He keeps shouting to come out and fight." "Who do you think he's talking to?" "Oh boy," Naruto muttered before he and the girls all made their way to the window and looked outside to the front of the street. Just as Talia said, there was Thor in the middle of the street. The god of thunder was looking a little grubbier than usual, likely on account of being shoved in a bin and left on a mountain in Switzerland, and didn't appear happy that Naruto had duped him. "Come out and face me. Face the might of thunder," he bellowed. People walking past hurried past the scene as quickly as they could. Cars passing nearby slowed down to get a view of his wild actions. Though one found themselves an unlucky victim of Thor as the red-haired god climbed atop and stood on the bonnet of the vehicle. "Let us duel to Helheim and back." "That's Thor?" Sally asked, staring intently at the man. Naruto sighed. "Yeah, that's him. I always pictured someone blonder." She tilted her head, though physically he's everything else I imagined. "He's as big as Poseidon." Melano hummed with a hint of disapproval. "I can't say I've ever met the guy before, but he acts exactly how my father described him." Hades met him centuries ago, though I don't think Thor left a good impression on him. Then again, who does when it comes to my father? There was a scream outside, and everyone winced as Thor lifted his hammer and tapped the bonnet of the car with his hammer. The effect was instant, with the front half of the car suddenly buckling under the force behind it, and became little more than a crushed piece of debris pancaked on the road. The driver said nothing except scream as he stumbled out of the car and ran in the other direction. "Oh geez." Naruto ran a hand over his face, annoyance growing as the god of thunder continued making a scene. The last thing they needed was someone calling the police. That would make matters far worse. I should probably go out and sort this out, even if this is going to be a real pain in my ass. He turned away from the window before voicing his surprise when he noticed someone was missing. Hestia? Melano and Sally both looked at where the goddess of the hearth had been standing moments ago before everyone heard the front door open. The three of them turned back to the window and watched as the eldest member of the Olympian family descended the steps and made her way over to Thor. The blonde couldn't see her face, but judging by the way she was walking, almost like a female Terminator zeroing on their target, she wasn't happy. Eventually, they all saw Thor turn in her direction, and the man had the decency to stop his destruction and appear pleased by her presence. He threw his arms in the air and jumped beside her. However, before he could say a word, Naruto, Melano, and Sally all winced as the right hand of Hestia lit up in fire and slapped the larger immortal in the cheek. The connection of palm to face was loud, and the god of thunder had the decency to stumble back a step before finding Hestia's hand locked around his ear and dragged back to the house. "Ouch, that has to sting," Melano muttered, looking in disbelief that the kind and sweet Hestia had it in her to slap someone like Thor. Who knew she had it in her? "Unhand me. Goddess of the hearth you may be, but I am the mighty Thor." "Oh, shut up, you buffoon, before you cause any more damage." Footsteps reappeared in the hallway as the front door closed. The voices drew the attention of the two demigods, who turned and looked at the hallway. Talia made to head out and find out what was going on, but instead found herself being lifted by Naruto by the scruff of her neck and deposited back onto the couch. "Hey, stay here, Talia. Aunt Hestia and I need to have words with an old friend of ours." Closing the door behind them, he made a beeline for the kitchen and was treated to the sight of Hestia, still with her hand locked around the god of thunder's ear and pushing him into a chair. "Unhand me, woman. One does not pinch the ear of the son of Odin, lest they wish to feel my wrath." When the blonde walked into the kitchen, the Aesir's annoyance appeared to leave him, excitement washing over his face. "H. My friend, that was a sneaky trick you pulled, but dropping me on a mountain is not something I haven't survived before. Come, let us battle." Though he tried to stand up, The larger man found himself releasing a high-pitched squeal as Hestia twisted his ear in a position it wasn't meant to go. "What did I just tell you?" Hestia barked back. It was uncommon to see Hestia get riled up, but Thor had a knack of doing so to calmer immortals. Naruto sighed, rubbing his forehead with his palm. "Look, Thor, it's good to see you, but I'm not fighting you. New York isn't exactly a place built for a battle like ours. A bit of warning would have been nice too if you were coming. But my friend, our battles are legendary. When our fists collide, the very foundations of the 9 realms shake in anticipation. You can't tell me you don't wish to feel that again." Naruto made a face and shook his head. "Sorry, but I'm not interested. I only fight when I have to, not to satisfy the whims of a god who constantly loses his hammer, which also happens to be one of the most powerful weapons in all creation." Like a child, Thor let out a whine and blew a raspberry. "You're no fun. I came all this way expecting you to indulge me. This is incredibly disappointing." Thor crossed his arms and winced as the tightness around his ear remained. "Please let go of my ear." He turned and looked up at the goddess. "I'll behave." There was a glumness to his voice. "Do you promise not to cause total mayhem and not pick a fight?" Yes, I promise." The hand left his ear, and he brought his own up to gently soothe it. "I really can't tempt you in a bout of fisticuffs." "Nope, tough luck. Go pick a fight with a giant or something. We both know they're not nearly as fun. Then go pick a fight with a fire giant. Those guys are always looking for a good fight. That's right up your alley." "Bob, this is the god of thunder?" Sally asked, leaning over and whispering in Melano's ear. "He's not exactly what I pictured. Are all gods from the Norse pantheon so idiotic? Who knows? We mostly keep to ourselves. Gods don't normally mingle with other pantheons unless it's strictly business." She looked at Thor and watched in distaste as he picked something out of his ear. "This one, though, he's an idiot of the highest order," Melano replied, appearing less than impressed at the Norse god. Her father's description of the man was on point. No wonder he didn't have a good thing to say about him. Hearing their voices, Thor looked past Naruto and Hestia and found the younger goddess and the mortal woman staring at him. His eyebrows shot up in Naruto, and Hestia watched as he hung his hammer back on his waist and stepped forward. Sally barely had a moment to react before she found herself under Thor's gaze, the god towering over her and placing his arm above her as he leaned on the wall. A tiny smirk was on his face. "So, tell me, mortal, aside from being drop-dead gorgeous, what do you do for a living? And do you by chance like the gun show?" The muscles in his arms flexed, showing off his powerful arms. "How about we get out of here, and I'll show you how the god of thunder treats a woman." "Oh gods!" Melano wanted to gag, and the expressions on Naruto and Hestia's faces weren't any better. Sally didn't appear to know what to do with her face, flushed from his comments, and found herself stepping back in surprise as the goddess of ghosts got between them. "Back off. She's not interested, spark plug. Who are you?" He looked Melano up and down. "I don't recognize you, though you smell of the underworld." He rubbed his chin. "Someone connected to that old fart, Hades, I assume? You're as pale as he is, though you're much better looking." He shrugged before saying, "I suppose you can come too. I have energy plenty for both of you." Dash behind him. A hand wrapped in flames grabbed his ear and yanked him away and made the god of thunder bellow in agony as he was forced back into the chair. Hestia stood behind him, looking positively wrathful at the comments he made, to the point where Naruto had to stand behind her and keep her from melting Thor's face off. "You really can't help putting your foot in your mouth, can you?" Naruto muttered. "They're not interested, so don't flirt with them." That was also the cheesiest pickup line I've heard in years. I think every love goddess in existence would be hunched over in agony. "I thought it was pretty good," Thor whined. It took a minute for Naruto to calm Hestia down before she finally let go of Thor, though the man's ear was red all over with burns. "Your grip is still like an iron claw after all these centuries, Hestia. Would you smile if I said it was good to see you?" "No." "Oh, well, no matter." He turned and looked at Naruto. "So really no battle?" Naruto shook his head, afraid not. Thor visibly deflated, but ended up shrugging his shoulders. "Oh, well, maybe in another century." Thor stood back up. idly keeping watch of Hestia to ensure she didn't grab him by the ear again. He extended his hand towards the blonde, and after a moment of hesitation, Naruto shook it. It's been a long time, my friend. It has. You haven't visited Asgard or Vanaheim in centuries. I know many in my pantheon would love to see you again. Thor nudged his elbow into the blonde. Lady Freya always asks for you. She says she misses your presence in her halls. I'm sure she does. Naruto rolled his eyes and caught Melino looking at him. What? You been to Asgard and Vanaheim? She asked, looking visibly surprised at this new piece of information. And, you know Freya? When were you going to share that with the rest of the class? Naruto shrugged. Now I guess. Honestly, he hadn't thought to mention it. The two pantheons tended to stay out of each other's way, although he heard a few confrontations and interactions occurred over the years. The only Greek god who had any interaction with them was Hestia, and that was through him. I lived there for a century. Vanaheim, but I visited Asgard on occasion. Melino let her jaw drop while turning to look at Sally. This guy, can you believe him? Sally didn't appear to be baffled by the revelation. Is it that surprising? She looked at the blonde. Vanaheim is the Vanir version of heaven, right? She didn't know much about Norse mythology, but she knew some things. Deciding to learn all she could about the Greek pantheon after finding out one of its gods knocked her up, she dove deep into the lore surrounding them. Sometimes her mind wandered, and she wondered if any of the other pantheons existed too. It appears she was correct. What's Freya like? Freya? She's nice enough. We got on well, though she wasn't very pleased when I chose to leave and return to Earth. Naruto scratched the back of his head. I haven't really heard much from her since then. Freya can be quite petty. She reminds me of your love goddess, whom I've never had the pleasure of meeting. She doesn't take people rejecting her very well. Thor added, at least, she's not as persistent as Aphrodite is, Hestia muttered from Naruto's side. Honestly, the Olympian goddess of love didn't understand the concept of being rejected. Yeah, tell me about it. He was thankful he hadn't had a run-in with the love goddess since the pantheon got barred from visiting. He was well aware of her sneaking into his home and his bedroom, but Hestia dealt with her accordingly. Since you're here, do me a favor and don't destroy anything. Do you not trust me, my old friend? Is that a serious question? Before Thor could answer, the door to the kitchen swung open, with Talia walking inside to join the rest of the adults. The little girl was rather confused with everything that was going on. She could hear raised voices coming from the kitchen and decided to investigate. Uncle? Auntie? What's going on? She asked and found herself staring up at the large red-haired man who'd been shouting fighting words in the street. Talia had never seen someone so massive before. He was even bigger than her uncle. The god of thunder's attention turned from the adult to the young girl and started smelling the air. A scent he was familiar with floated through the air, one he recognized as the scent of the ozone. He'd smelled it faintly when he got dragged into the house by Hestia, but it was overwhelming when the girl appeared, attacking his sense of smell. So, she was the source of it. He pointed towards Talia in a rather dramatic fashion. A child of Zeus. He looked over at Naruto again. Are you taking in more strays, my friend? Don't call her a stray. Don't forget, the last demigod I took care of was your daughter, and I am forever grateful. He sniffed the air and looked at the stove. Do I smell food? Are you cooking? Naruto sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. No, that's Hestia who's cooking tonight. He gave Thor a look. Why? All Thor did was give a slightly pleading look and patted his stomach. He hadn't eaten since that morning and was overdue for his next meal. He didn't feel like waiting until he returned to Asgard and plead with his darling wife, Sif, to cook him up something. Hestia and Naruto turned to look at each other. Naruto held up his hands and shrugged, trying to ask the goddess of the hearth to be reasonable. Her dislike of the god of thunder was evident for all to sense, even for said deity. The staring contest went on for a few moments, with Hestia trying desperately to convey how unhappy she was with the idea of Thor staying for dinner. Eventually, her shoulders slumped, and she released a huff. Fine, but only for tonight. You leave as soon as your plate is clean. Thor let out a chant of success while Naruto put his arm around his best friend's shoulder. It's just one evening. Hestia pouted, putting her hands on her hips. It's better be. At the same time, the Norse god of thunder was visiting the Uzumaki home. Another had followed her father as he trekked through the 9 worlds, using the world tree and narrowly avoided the overgrown squirrel that took up residence along its branches and landed in Central Park just as Thor had earlier that day. This world has changed much since I was last here. The figure was female, though she stood out compared to the Midgardian women who walked past her, looking up and down her form. It was as if they'd never seen a Valkyrie before. Standing 6 foot in height with pale, silver blonde hair tied in a braid, the young woman looked no older than 18. Through her eyes and the way she carried herself spoke of a person far older than she appeared. A leather set of Valkyrie armor adorned her body, though she visibly looked uncomfortable wearing it as a sheen of sweat quickly covered her brow as the June sun shined down on her. A golden necklace with a hammer emblem sat comfortably around her neck, and strapped to her back was an extendable spear and a shield. Her pale blue eyes looked around the area. She didn't remember such large buildings existed in Midgard. They were almost as high as the clouds, though her gaze did rest on the Empire State Building that stood off in the distance. She could feel the thrum of power that came from the Olympian pantheon, making the girl somewhat uncomfortable at being so close to a pantheon that wasn't her own. Mixing with other pantheons wasn't encouraged, though sometimes it was known to happen. None sought out these instances more like her foolish father, who loved nothing more than to poke and prod the other gods when he got bored. Sometimes she wondered if fighting was his true love and not the goddess of war that awaited him back home on Asgard. Her father sometimes infuriated her, but she could say confidently she knew him like the back of his hand. There is only one man father would have sought out for a fight after all this time. She muttered to herself, groaning as the image of Thor getting kicked around by a familiar blonde appeared in her mind. Her father was not the only reason she was in Midgard, though. There was another reason she was in New York, and it required the man that raised her all the same. You there! Answer thy question. Grabbing a nearby mortal, she held the unsuspecting man by the collar of his shirt, his eyes going wide as he was held by the large blonde woman. Yes. I'm looking for an establishment known as the Fox's Denver. It's run by a man known as Naruto Uzumaki. Give me its location, or feel the wrath of the daughter of Thor. She tightened her grip on the man's collar. The man blinked and looked at her funny. The Fox's Den? I think that's a place in the West Village. Which way is the West Village? And why is there a village in the heart of city? That seems counterproductive for all you've built here. He looked at her funny. It's not an actual village. Are you an idiot? The next thing the man knew, he was finding himself getting thrown into the air and dangling from a tree, flailing around as his pants got caught on one of the branches. You there, where's the West Village? And have you heard of a man known as Naruto Uzumaki? This series of questioning went on for a good 5 minutes with more people, men and women finding themselves thrown into trees or in nearby bush when they questioned the blonde woman's intelligence. One girl even made fun of what she was wearing and soon found her very lacy thong pulled so high in the air she started seeing stars. Mortals are useless, the girl commented with a huff. I know where you can find Naruto Uzumaki. Turning around at the voice, her eyes widened as the most beautiful woman she'd ever seen looked back at her. Her blonde hair fell past her shoulder blades and hauntingly beautiful green eyes one could get lost in. She was dressed for the weather in a frilly pink summer dress that stopped just above the knees and a pair of high heels that looked impossible to walk in. Her smile was coy and spoke of giddy mischief. With her heels on, she was the same height as the daughter of Thor. Gunilla stopped and stared at the beautiful woman. She could sense the divine energy rolling off her body. The smell of fresh jasmine was all around her. She couldn't help but swallow thickly. She was mesmerizing to look at. She could have sworn her appearance would shift with each blink, and long tresses of black hair and emerald green eyes would flicker into being. Remembering where she was, she approached cautiously. Why, you are an Olympian, aren't you? Of the Greek pantheon. The woman smiled and held out her hand, showing her knuckles. The goddess of love, Aphrodite. What's your name, young Valkyrie? Gunilla. Trepidatiously, Ganilla took Aphrodite's hand and kissed the knuckles, getting a widened smile from her. You said you know where Naruto is? I do. I believe I saw him entertaining your father, Thor. At least, that's who I believe he is. The scent of ozone lingers around him much in the way it does around Zeus. The woman walked around Ganilla, her shoes clinking as she moved. You have the same scent, though it's not as potent. It was very bold of you to come here when you haven't gained our permission. Then again, your father did the same. Ganilla grimaced. My father does not always think things through and does things on a whim most days. However, I'm here on behalf of Lord Odin to ensure my father doesn't cause trouble and to meet with Naruto Uzumaki. Might ask why? I'm rather fond of him, even though he's managed to avoid me these last few years. I'm not at liberty to say anything. Oh, you won't even tell little old me. Aphrodite fluttered her eyelashes, and Ganilla felt her willpower take a hit. Swallowing thickly one more time, she crossed her arms and held her own. Even you. I can be very persuasive. Aphrodite looked Ganilla up and down again. I've never been with a Valkyrie before. I can't help but wonder. Ganilla didn't say anything. Half expecting to be blown away by the Olympian, she was surprised to find the goddess shrugging her shoulders with her smile still present on her face. Very well. I'll only find out in due time. Elegantly spinning on the thin tip of her heels, Aphrodite skipped off, ignoring the looks of hopeless dedication rolling off the mortals she moved past. Come along, young Valkyrie. I'll show you the way. Ganilla didn't need to be told twice and quickly followed after the goddess of love, hoping no one else from the Greek pantheon showed up and caused a problem. Then again, she couldn't help but feel uneasy being led away by the Aphrodite. She knew the stories that floated around the beautiful deity and knew what a tricky individual she could be when things didn't go her way. She couldn't help but wonder what kind of connection she had to her blonde target. Haha, she's so tiny. Are you sure she's a daughter of Zeus? Thor asked, looking jovial as he held Talia in his hands and dangled her in the air. Said girl was looking unimpressed, her arms folded and cheeks puffed out. She has his eyes, I suppose, but does she have his right hook? He put her down on the ground and crouched in front of her. Punch me right here, little one. That appeared to get Talia's interest as her earlier disapproval disappeared. Okay. She clenched her fist and ready to land a punch on the awaiting deity. There will be no violence in this house. Thank you very much. Hestia admonished, guiding her niece away from Thor and leading her to her seat around the table. Dinner was being served up, and the god of thunder had invited himself for dinner. Go sit down in your usual place. I'll be serving up food in a moment. Okay, Aunt Hestia. The daughter of Zeus marched to the table like a good girl, while Hestia directed a huff Thor's way. You've been here all of 5 minutes. Behave, or you'll be out. She reaffirmed. Just because Naruto was okay with Thor being here, that didn't mean she was. Oh, she and the god of thunder had met numerous times, and each time she was reaffirmed why they were like oil and water. Throughout the millennia, the duo of herself and Naruto would constantly get interrupted by a small number of deities who were aware of the blonde's existence, but none more so than Thor. They were the polar opposite of each other. She was quiet. He was loud. She was gentle and patient. He was violent and brutish. He reminded her too much of Ares. Ares was her nephew. Therefore, she had some amount of love for him. Thor, on the other hand, was a member of another pantheon who seemed to enjoy getting on her nerves. Wherever he appeared, he caused a mess and didn't appear to care about the consequences. Hestia didn't openly hate anyone, barring her own father, but she could say with confidence she didn't really like Thor either. Tolerate was likely the best way she could describe it. She tolerated him because, for some reason, Naruto was friends with the man and enjoyed his company when he wasn't trying to swing a hammer into his skull. Go take a seat around the table, Hestia told him. A ladle appeared in her hand and pointed at him. But one whiff of trouble, and you're out. Gods. She sounded like Hera. For once, Thor had the sense not to say anything stupid and merely gave a salute as he wandered into the dining room. Sally and Percy were already in the room, with the said boy taking a keen interest in a large man he'd never seen before. He gave the god of thunder a small wave. Hello. In response, Thor waved back similarly. Hello, tiny human. I'm Percy. Who are you? I'm Thor, god of thunder. He pulled out Mjolnir and showed it to the son of Poseidon. And this is Mjolnir, one of the mightiest weapons in the known universe. He grinned, giving a quick spin and feeling the air push against his skin. I have killed many monsters with my hammer, some as large as mountains. Percy looked up at him in awe. Whoa. He reached his hands out. Can I hold? Of course, Dash, Thor started to say before feeling two sets of eyes bearing into his skull. Sally and Molino looked at him as if telling him to think twice and choose a different answer. The hammer was already halfway across the table when he pulled back. Perhaps when you're bigger. Nah. Percy pouted and stuck out his lower lip. Please. Percy Jackson, Sally said next to her son, looking at him with a stern expression. It would be much too heavy for you. No means no. As Sally spoke with her son, the god of thunder looked in Melino's direction, but quickly turned away as the goddess of ghosts leveled him with a dark glare. Perhaps it was best not to aggravate the daughter of Hades. Thor could have sworn there was a dark aura floating around her body, but he was sure that was a trick of the light. The chill running up his spine? Yeah, that was probably her. Feeling a tug on his shirt, he turned and looked down at the seat next to him. Talia was next to him, her big blue eyes looking up at him full of curiosity. Yes, do you know my dad? Thor made a small humming noise of sorts. We met a couple of times. What's he like? You've not met him. Talia shook her head. Uncle and Auntie said there are rules that stop him from seeing me. I don't really get it. Talia scrunched up her face. Does he not love me? Thor's mouth opened, yet no words came out. As much of a blockhead as he was, how in the world was he meant to answer that? It was like getting pushed between a giant and a hard place. What was he supposed to say? What was he meant to do? Naruto and Hestia were still in the kitchen while Sally was talking to her son. The daughter of Hades appeared to hear the question, but was merely watching him in mild amusement. Her coal-like eyes sparkled in sick glee. Was she enjoying the fact he was squirming beneath the questioning gaze of this little girl? Like daughter, like father, I suppose. Trying to come up with an answer as quickly as possible, he let out an audible groan of relief when the sound of the doorbell rang through the house, distracting Talia and making the girl hop out of her seat. She made a beeline through the dining room and ducked beneath Naruto's arms as she raced to answer the front door. She didn't appear fazed as she heard her aunt call her name as she reached for the door and swung it open. Hello, Talia, Naruto said with a hint of sternness in his tone as he came up behind her. His mouth opened, but before words could come out, a strangled noise appeared. Aphrodite. The blonde-haired beauty gave him a dazzling smile. Hello, you hunky man, you. Long time no see. She walked straight past Talia, whose only thought was, who the heck is this lady? The sound of Aphrodite's heels clacked against the hallway, and Naruto soon found himself just inches from the divine goddess. You look more delicious than the last time I saw you. Then again, I didn't think my window of opportunity with you was an eternity. Naturally, the blonde did the only thing he could think of in this situation and called out, Hestia, get out here. What? He heard from the kitchen as Hestia's head appeared from around the corner. Her eyes zeroed in on the goddess of love. Oh, for goodness sake, what is it with you all today? Hestia stormed out of the kitchen, face showing how unamused she was as yet another deity visiting during dinner time. Aphrodite proved quick as she skirted around Naruto, using the blonde as a shield to avoid Hestia's hand as she released a Tinkerbell-like giggle. Don't be like that, Hestia. I'm merely visiting, she replied, narrowly dodging one of Hestia's hands. You've been keeping Naruto all to yourself for so long. I just want a little peace. That's all. You know as well as I do, that's not the kind of relationship we have. An uncommon growl escaped from Hestia. Will you hold still? What's going on out here? Melino's head popped around the corner. Oh. She was soon followed by Thor, Sally, and Percy, who appeared from behind his mother's leg. Oh my God, she's beautiful. Sally whispered and turned to Melino. Is she, you know? Yeah, that's Aphrodite, goddess of love and the most irritating woman in my overly large family. Wow, I wouldn't compliment her too much. Her ego's big enough already. Sally couldn't help it, but when she looked at Aphrodite, her eyes kept flickering from blue to sea green. She wondered why that was. Even her hair was going back and forth between blonde and black. The god of thunder, to his credit, didn't linger on the Greek love goddess. His focus shifted when another figure appeared by the door. Daughter, did you follow me all the way to Midgard? Naruto's eyes widened as a familiar young woman came into view, awkwardly standing in the door. Gunilla. Hi, uncle. She gave a short wave as Naruto steadily made his way over to her until he was a foot away from her. Sorry to come on in dash. The blonde Valkyrie didn't get to finish her sentence as the shinobi brought her in for a tight hug, his arms resting around her shoulders. Very quickly, whatever awkwardness Gunilla had vanished, and a beaming smile lit up her face. You know you're welcome here anytime you like. You'll never get turned away. He gently cupped her face. I haven't seen you in almost 50 years. You haven't aged a day. I could say the same. It's one of the perks of being a Valkyrie and living at Hotel Valhalla. Aging isn't much of an issue. A downcast look appeared. I'm sorry it's been so long since I last visited you. With my duties as the leader of the Valkyries, it doesn't leave me with much free time. The blonde shook his head. That's okay. You're here now. That's what matters. He put his arm around her shoulder and led her forward. Let me introduce you to everyone. You remember Hestia, right? For one as formidable in appearance as the daughter of Thor, it was a surprise for all to see her act in such a shy manner. I do. It's nice to see you again after all this time, Lady Hestia. She gave a polite bow, but was waved off by Hestia and once again embraced. It's lovely to see you again, my dear. Hestia gently cupped her face. It's nice to see you didn't inherit much from your oaf of a father in terms of appearance. Hestia's smile widened when she heard Thor grumble behind her. You must stay for dinner. We're about to serve up. I would like that, thank you. She replied before Naruto introduced everyone else. That's Melano, the daughter of Hades and Greek goddess of ghosts. Melano gave a nonchalant wave. And that's Sally. The little boy next to her is her son, Percy. It's nice to meet you. Sally greeted. Percy merely gave a small wave, poking his head out from behind Sally, acting all shy all of a sudden. Aphrodite, already know, Naruto muttered and leaned in close to whisper. Dare I ask how you met? I ran into her at the Central Park. She offered to show me the way here. Though, I did feel like she had an ulterior motive. She gave the love goddess a side glance, with the said woman being scolded by Hestia, who hadn't forgotten her fellow deity was there. She wants something from you? Naruto snorted, of sorts. He wasn't going into any detail before gently pulling Talia to stand in front of him with his hands resting on her shoulders. And this is Talia? She's been under my care for 5 years now. She and you have a lot in common. The daughter of Zeus didn't say anything. She merely looked up at the blonde girl with widened eyes, her expression showing off an odd look. Who is this girl? And how'd she get so tall and strong? She looked like she could bench press a car. Talia had never seen another girl look so tough. Gunilla could feel Talia's eyes resting on her and knelt on one knee, getting a good look at the girl. Her hands came up and surprised the younger demigod by taking her hands into her own. A kind expression, one she only displayed to those close to her got to see, took over on Gunilla's face. When I was a little girl, Uncle looked after me just as he looked after you and showed me right from wrong. Talia tilted her head to look up at Naruto before quickly returning to Gunilla. Really? Gunilla gently squeezed her hands. Are you happy here? This time it was Talia who nodded, conviction written all over her face. Uncle is the best. Talia looked up at Naruto again, who smiled back happily. If Uncle looked after both of us, does that make us sisters? The innocence of a child. Gunilla laughed, as did some of the adults. Melano even let out a small sound, though would readily deny it to anyone. In a way, I guess it does. I think I'd like that. I think I'd like that, too. She gave Talia one last squeeze before standing back up. When Naruto looked at her, her expression changed again, this time into one more serious. I wish I could say I came here for personal reasons, but I'm afraid I'm here on business. Lord Odin has asked me to come and find you. Naruto blinked in surprise and felt the eyes of everyone else in the room on him. Find me? Why? We've run into a small problem. A problem in Jotunheim. Ah. Naruto rubbed the back of his neck. The problem being who I'm thinking of? She nodded. That's right. One of them is picking fights with the giants and running amok. Gunilla explained. I try to stop him myself, but he doesn't listen to me. Lord Odin tried to reason with him, but was promptly ignored. Gunilla pouted. He still just sees me as an annoying brat. Yeah, that sounds about right. You'd think after all these millennia, he'd have calmed down some of his more extreme tendencies. The blonde sighed. Well, it's not really a question if I'm going or not. I'm the only one who can reason with him. I guess I'm heading to Jotunheim. That damn idiot. Whoa, hold up, Melino replied, making everyone turn in her direction. What do you mean you're going to Jotunheim? And who's she talking about? What other kind of secrets was he keeping from them? Hestia smiled. I think I have an idea. She gave Naruto a knowing look. You're probably thinking right. Naruto chuckled, patting Talia on the head as she said inquisitively up at him. To answer your question, Melino, I have these friends who originate from the old era, just like myself. 9 of them, in fact, and each one is as quirky and bizarre as the next. It sounds like one of them is causing trouble, and that means I need to leave for a few days. Part 20. I'm not sure I like this. Naruto lifted his head and looked at the goddess of the hearth. He was down on one knee, his hands toying with the laces to Talia's shoes as he made the bunny ears. She didn't appear overly pleased. Her arms were crossed over her front and held the posture of someone who wasn't happy, but her expression told a different story. Her face appeared apprehensive. The reason she was worried? Because Talia would be traveling with Naruto and Gunilla and visiting Jotunheim for the first time. According to Naruto, he'd been thinking about taking Talia to visit his old friends once she was old enough, but with this new situation, there was no time like the present. Plus, he'd introduced Gunilla to them when she was not much older than the daughter of Zeus. They were standing outside his home. Gunilla was right there with them, having stayed with him for the past couple of days, waiting for the weekend to come. They wanted to go earlier in the week, but they didn't want to take Talia out of school, so they waited. Thor kept his promise to the goddess and left after dinner, though he did help himself to most of the cooking that evening, devouring everything he got his hands on. Melino was at the Fox's Den, running the ship that morning until Hestia went in later in the afternoon. He made sure to leave a few clones in the back to help them with the kitchen duties. Sally and Percy, meanwhile, were visiting Montauk for the weekend, having some mother-son bonding time away from the craziness they'd witnessed earlier that week. He couldn't blame them. It was a lot to take in. The blonde stood up, ruffling Talia's head, and stepped forward towards the deity. He put one arm around her shoulders and gave her a quick squeeze. Don't worry. Nothing's going to happen to her. I'll be right there with her, and so will Gunilla. I know, but still, Hestia bit the side of her lip. Isn't she too young for this? Not to mention, she has homework. We finished her homework last night, remember? It was rather amusing to see Hestia's worry, but Naruto wanted to alleviate her worries and ushered Talia forward. Talia, can you tell Aunt Hestia the main rule while we're away from home? The little girl scampered forward. Uh-huh. The golden rule is that I'm not allowed to wander off. I have to stay with Uncle or Big Sis Gunilla at all times. The blonde gave Hestia a proud look, watching as her face was a mishmash of thoughts and emotions. Are you sure I can't convince you to let her stay? He gave her shoulder another squeeze. She will be fine. I'll be right there. It's not like the others will do anything, and any giant will run a mile if they see Gunilla. Hestia gave a little hum, but still didn't appear convinced. You know, for someone who claims she doesn't have a motherly bone in her body, you sure are worrying like one. There is nothing wrong with having a little apprehension about the notion that my niece is off to another world. Hestia replied in a matter-of-fact tone. It's not like it's a place I'm able to visit on a whim should something go wrong. Only the Norse pantheon had access to the other 9 worlds that sat connected thanks to the Yggdrasil. The world tree was so ingrained within the Norse pantheon, it became rare, if not impossible, for a deity of another pantheon to gain access to it. She'd seen it once, back in the early days of the Greek pantheon, long before any of Zeus's children came into being and first made contact with the Norse. It would be correct in thinking the relationship between the two were frosty at best, with both sides keeping to their own, except for a few instances when either side met by chance while out in the world. Well, it's a good thing nothing will go wrong. He grinned and let out a silent laugh as Hestia gently pushed him away and started smoothing down the jumper Talia was wearing, muttering something about not getting the creases out of the fabric. Hestia could be such a worrywart. Leaving Talia to be fretted over by her aunt, Naruto stood next to Ganilla, who was staring at the pair. "You okay?" Ganilla nodded. "I'm fine. I guess I'm still just a little surprised at your new situation. I know it's been some time since we last saw one another, but I didn't think you would accept another demigod into your care, especially one not from the Norse pantheon." The older blonde shrugged. "Well, it wasn't planned. When I came to New York, it was under the guise of keeping a low profile. I figure I could stay here for a decade. Maybe two if I was lucky." He chuckled. "I didn't expect the Fox's Den to become so popular with the Divine." He nodded towards Talia. One day, Talia's mother visited, and when she left, Talia fell into my care. She walked away and didn't look back. I still don't understand how a parent can do such a thing. Ganilla's lips thinned. "Where's her mother now?" "I don't know," he answered honestly. "I don't think Hestia checks on her anymore. She has no reason to, now that Talia is here. I think she would have some choice words to give Beryl grace if they ever met again. I think there are a lot of people who would say the same thing. Talia is very loved. She has only benefited from her mother's abandonment. Think what state she could be in if she was still under her care." I try not to. He put one hand on Ganilla's shoulder. "But you're right. She's happy here, and that's what matters." He looked up at the sky. "I only wish her father would come down from time to time and visit his daughter." He turned back to Hestia and Talia. "Are you finished mothering her yet, Hestia?" "Oh, shush you." She stuck her tongue out at the blonde before kneeling and wrapping her niece in a hug. "Be good. I want to hear all about your trip when you get back tomorrow." She kissed her niece's forehead. "I put a few sweet treats just for you in your backpack. Don't eat them all in one go." "Okay, Annie. And don't worry. I'll be fine." The goddess of the hearth sighed while standing back up. "I know you will be, but I worry all the same." She gave Naruto and Ganilla each a look. "Both of you keep a close eye on her, please." When both blondes nodded, she brought both of them into a hug. "In that case, enjoy your time in Jotunheim, and I'll see you when you get back. I packed some food for you all for when you get hungry. Naruto, there's a thermos with coffee inside, and another with hot chocolate for Talia. You're the best, Hestia." Ganilla held a hand out to Talia, which the girl promptly clasped onto. "We should get going. The sooner this mess is sorted out, the better." "Agreed. Where is the closest point to the World Tree?" Hestia asked. In order for the trio to make their way to Jotunheim, they would need to travel across the branches of the Yggdrasil that connects the 9 worlds. They could have taken the Rainbow Bridge, or the Bifrost as it was also known by, but that would alert Zeus and the rest of Olympus that someone not from their pantheon had entered their territory without asking. "Boston," Ganilla answered. "Lord Odin hoped to have an access point created in New York centuries ago, given how integral this city is to the world, but your council vetoed that decision when proposed. He didn't want to ruffle any feathers by creating it without their consent. Luckily, I have some of my Flying Thunder God Technique markers set up in Boston, so we can get there in a flash," Naruto added. "You couldn't set up a marker in Jotunheim?" "I do, but I can't flash between worlds. The technique doesn't let me dimension hop, in a sense. When we get to Jotunheim, I can flash us to where we need to go." Naruto tied the strap of his backpack around his waist. "We have a meeting point for when I visit. I'll flare out my chakra, and they'll head over. They'll sense it immediately." Taking Talia's hand in his own, he felt Gunla's hand rest on his shoulder. "We'll be gone for no more than a day. We'll get this whole mess sorted out. See you tomorrow, Auntie. Goodbye, Lady Hestia." Before Hestia could say a word, the trio was gone, leaving the goddess behind. She released a small sigh before turning around and walking inside. She noticed the sky seemed to darken and gray. The weather over New York typically altered with her brother's ever-changing mood. She couldn't help but wonder what was causing Zeus's mood to fluctuate so much. With her circle of privacy, she doubted he was spying on her. He knew better than to try that. He'd made that mistake once and promised he would never do it again. Closing the door behind her, she rested the back of her head against the wood. Well, at least it means I get a night to myself. Whoa, this place is so cool. Talia yelled at the top of her lungs, perched on the back of the daughter of Thor, looking out across the vast void the world tree occupied. It's bigger than the Empire State Building. The trio didn't linger when they flashed into existence in Boston and made a beeline for the nearest entrance to the World Tree. Naruto's marker brought them straight to the Kendall Square roof garden, where the hidden entrance sat written in the bark of a tree. It took Gunilla a wave of her hand, and muttering a few words beneath her breath before a portal, no bigger than 7 feet high and wide, opened up in the air, revealing a mishmash of colors awaiting them. Walking through, they found themselves standing on one of the branches of the Yggdrasil. The branch alone was the size of a freeway and stretched on behind them as far as the eye could see. Gunilla turned her head to look at the dark-haired girl. The Yggdrasil is likely the biggest object of power within the 9 worlds. She told her. Her lower arms were wrapped tight around Talia's legs to keep her in place. Naruto and Hestia had both informed her that Talia was not a fan of heights, making walking across the branches of the World Tree far direr in the little girl's eyes. It connects the 9 worlds, creating a bridge between them, and allowing those of the Norse pantheon to use its branches to move from one to another. How'd it get so big? No one truly knows. Well, Gunilla stopped for a moment, a thoughtful expression on her face. Perhaps Lord Odin might know. If he does, he keeps such information to himself. As the god of wisdom, there's little he wouldn't know. When the 9 worlds was born, so was the Yggdrasil. I have no idea which is older. They're both older than the gods of our pantheons, older than those that came before them, as old as the primordials that make up the first age of immortals. A loud explosion rang above them. Something heavy soon collided with one of the branches on the right side of them. Talia frowned, peering over Gunilla's shoulder. The Valkyrie didn't appear the slightest bit bothered by the sound, and kept walking forward as she headed for one of the entrances that would take them to Jotunheim. "What's Uncle doing?" Talia asked, her index finger coming around to poke the blonde Valkyrie on the cheek. "He just took off when we arrived." "Is he not walking with us?" "Oh, I'm sure he'd walk with us if he could." Gunilla soothed, patting Talia on top of the head. "You see, there's a creature that lives on the world tree known as Ratatosk. Think of a squirrel, but one that's bigger than a truck." Talia's eyes went wide at that, urging her to continue. "Ratatosk's goal is to bring down the Yggdrasil, and he's been trying for a long time. No one knows why he wants to bring it down, but to those who use the world tree to get around the 9 worlds, Ratatosk will always intercept them and try to cause mayhem. He also spends his time spreading lies and rumors between the dragon, Nidhogg, at the roots of the tree, and the anonymous eagle and Vedrfolnir at the top. Oh, so that's what Uncle Naruto is doing. He's keeping us safe by drawing Ratatosk's attention towards him. He and Ratatosk have met previously, and I don't think he's overly fond of him. How come? I'm not sure, but I think Uncle Naruto might have stolen Ratatosk's nuts on more than one occasion. The mighty squirrels of the world tree never forget a face, nor any slight made against him." As she said that, the very person they were talking about landed next to them, making spider web cracks appear on the bark as he landed. "You two okay?" Naruto asked, wiping his brow as looking the two. "We're fine. I was telling Talia about your history with Ratatosk, and why he dislikes you so much." Talia looked up at him with all the innocence of the world residing on her face. "Did you really steal the big squirrel nuts, Uncle?" The blonde snorted. "I didn't steal anything of his, Talia's. His nuts did go missing, but that's because Thor stole them as a joke and blamed me for it. Now, that damn overgrown furball goes for me every time I use the Yggdrasil. Admittedly, I don't use it often, but still," he shrugged and turned to look at a neighboring branch a few hundred feet away from them, "it's still annoying." Soon enough, Talia found herself fixed at the furry beast running along the thick branch next to theirs. It was massive in size and appeared larger than how Gunilla described it. Its thick grayish-brown fur stood on end with a bushy tail almost as big as the rest of its body. Its eyes were beady and black like coal, and the daughter of Zeus could have sworn she could feel it glaring in their direction. It opened its mouth, and all that came out of it was a series of barks that made the air around it waver and shimmy. "His language is appalling," Ganilla said, shaking her head as the blonde shinobi frowned. "If Lady Hestia came with us, I fear she would burst a blood vessel if she heard his words. I'm glad they've never met. You and I both. I dread to think what would happen if that day ever came." He made a familiar hand sign, and half a dozen cones sprung to life and dashed across the branches and towards Ratatosk, who scurried across his branch to intercept the incoming pests. "I'll see you shortly." He patted their heads, much to Ganilla's mixture of amusement and annoyance. A moment later, he took off after his clones to join in, keeping Ratatosk entertained. The two girls ideally watched from afar as the clones jumped on the giant squirrel before the blonde shinobi skidded to a stop, threw his hand back, and allowed Rasengan to swirl to life in his palm. It grew and grew until it was the size of small truck and threw it forward to collide with Ratatosk squarely in the abdomen. The effect was immediate, and Ratatosk found itself flying through the air, launched off his feet. He soon smashed into a higher branch with a resounding impact. Talia scrunched up her face. "Doesn't that hurt the big squirrel?" she asked, watching closely as the giant squirrel shakily started standing back up. The expression on its face made it appear angry as it glanced down at its burnt fur. "I wouldn't worry. Ratatosk is incredibly durable. I've seen him take a lot worse and get back up." On cue, the furry beast wobbled to his feet, the fur on the front of his body scorched from the impact with an incensed look upon his face. "See, he's fine. What if he falls off the side?" Talia didn't dare look down, but the younger girl pictured it being a long way down to the bottom. "Does the world tree have a bottom?" "There is no bottom," Ganilla explained, "but if someone fell from the branches of the Yggdrasil, they would fall through an endless void until eventually falling through a gate that led to one of the 9 worlds. Like Midgard and this Jotunheim place we're going through." "That's right. The last thing you want is to fall into worlds like Muspelheim or Niflheim. One is a world of fire and lava, while the other is an endless winter of unbelievable harshness. Both are inhabited by giants of the elements of their world. They are prickly to outsiders, especially Muspelheim." Ganilla turned her head to look at Talia. "And then you have Helheim, the realm of the dead. I do not know much about that world, for I have never had a venture there in my 500 years of life, but it's controlled by the goddess, Hela. She does not take kindly to the living scouring upon her realm. I've heard she can be difficult to reason with, so most tend to avoid her." Another explosion, and both girls watched as Ratatosk sailed over them and impacted another branch far off to the left of them. The squirrel of the Yggdrasil was taking some heavy punishment, though both girls ignored him and carried on their way, even as their blonde protector pounced over, drop-kicking said B square in the jaw. "Jotunheim, man, that was irritating. I forgot how much crazy stamina that squirrel possesses," Naruto muttered, stepping through the portal in the bark of the Yggdrasil. He dusted himself off, ridding himself of pieces of bark and debris that came from his tussle with Ratatosk. Once done, the first thing he did was take a deep breath. The air in Jotunheim was cool and clean in a way that reminded him of home. Untainted by the technological advancement of humanity and the constant growth of cities, the world of the giants remained untouched. Great mountains and forests stretched across the world for as far as the eyes could see. Nature untouched and lakes untainted. It was as if he'd stepped back in time when the earth, or Midgard as the Norse would call it, was once the same. He stood there for a moment, taking it all in and letting his mastery of Senjutsu weave the power of nature across his body. It made him feel strong. It made him feel alive, rejuvenated. Perhaps coming to Jotunheim was a blessing in disguise. Wow! He heard a few meters in front of him. Ganilla and Talia stood side by side, the young daughter of Zeus now on her feet, and eyes full of wonder as she stared at the various mountains that surrounded the land. They'd arrived moments earlier before the blonde stepped through the portal into Jotunheim, and Talia had been quick to jump off Ganilla's back and stare at the new world around her. He and Hestia had taken her away to spots around the United States in the past 5 years, but they couldn't compare to the lands of Jotunheim. That was my first reaction when I saw Jotunheim for the first time. Of the 9 worlds, it's one of the most beautiful. The only ones that surpass it are Asgard and Vanaheim, though many may disagree. Naruto spoke, putting his hand on Talia's shoulder as he came to stand next to them. The mountains are so high. Everything is so big here. Even the trees were enormous, standing as big as the tallest buildings in New York City. Now that we're here, where do we need to go to meet your friends? The answer she got back was her guardian pointing towards one of the mountains off in the distance, which happened to be one of the larger ones. We're heading right there. Naruto pointed off in the distance, towards a tall solitary peak that sat away from the rest. It was so far away that if Talia held out her thumb, it would be no bigger than her fingernail. That's kind of far, isn't it? Talia asked, before feeling herself getting hoisted onto Naruto's back. Huh. If we walked, it would take us 2 or 3 days to reach the mountain. That's why I'm going to run and carry you. He grinned and looked at Ganilla. I can make a clone to carry you too if you like. Ganilla adamantly shook her head. Nah, why not? You loved it when you were little. I'm not some child you can throw on your back, all willy-nilly. Besides, Talia watched in amazement as a set of wings sprouted from Ganilla's back, golden like the sun and each side bigger than Talia in size. I can just fly there myself. Naruto nodded, impressed at the little showboating Ganilla was showing. Well, okay, if you're sure. We'll be waiting for you at the top. Before Talia or Ganilla could say another word, the blonde shinobi took off from the ground like a bullet and sped across the branches of the trees, his form barely more than a blur. All one could hear was Talia's screams becoming more and more distant. Ganilla didn't hang around and took off into the air, her golden wings gliding her across the air currents with the grace of a swan. Midgard, goodness, it sure is quiet without those two around here, Hestia muttered to herself, flicking on the lights of Casa del Uzumaki as she quietly closed the door behind her. Her day at the Fox's Den had been largely uneventful. The usual busy periods came and went with Melano not so subtly making offhanded comments about her boss and manager gallivanting across Jotunheim. If Hestia didn't know any better, she would have thought her brother's child was jealous. Not that the younger goddess would ever admit to such a thing. Making her jacket disappear into her closet up in her room, Hestia found herself standing in the hallway, unsure of what to do. Normally, she'd be getting dinner ready by now for Talia and Naruto, and afterwards, ensuring her niece was ready for bed. She developed a routine since taking up part-time residence, but now, she wasn't sure what to do with herself. I suppose I could head back to Olympus for the night. She muttered to herself before hearing another crash of thunder booming across the sky, the lightning lighting up the city. On second thought, I think I'll stay here. It sounds like Zeus has been in one of his moods all day. The weather progressive got worse as the day went on. Despite wondering what was causing her brother to have such a hissy fit, her main thoughts were with the blonde and dark-haired little girl currently a world away. Kicking off her shoes, she stretched out her arms and climbed up the stairs. How about a nice long bath with candles and bubbles? She told herself, smiling at the prospect as she removed a hairpin and let her long and luscious hair flow down her back. I think I've earned an evening to pamper myself. She didn't do it often, but she liked to treat herself when time afforded it. With Naruto and Talia away, why not spoil herself? Minutes later, as the bath began to fill up, Hestia found herself walking through the first-floor hallway in a white bathrobe, her hair swept down one side. A book was in her hand, one she'd been reading over the past fortnight. Before bed, she spent 30 minutes reading as a way of calming her mind and letting her body relax into the bed. It was a little habit she picked up from Athena. A thought hit Hestia that made her stop. There's no one around. I'm the only one home. Her free hand came up and played with the robe that covered her body. A playful smile was on her face. I mean, who would ever know? Biting her lip and waving her hand, forcing all the shutters and curtains to cover the windows in the house. Hestia undid the knot that kept her robe tight on her person and dropped it to the ground. Oh my, look what happened. She feigned surprise, one hand cupping her chin with an innocent look washing over her face. My robe came loose. How terrible! Standing in the hallway, her body uncovered and bare for no one but herself to see. I'm standing in the middle of Naruto's home, naked. A glass appeared in her hand, steadily filling up with wine. I'm about to drink wine in the middle of the hallway. I'm naked. She took a sip and smiled before heading back to the bathroom. Now, I'm skipping to the bathroom, still naked. She laughed and closed the door behind her. Jotunheim, landing on top of the single peak that was her destination, she was unsurprised to find Naruto and Taliah already there waiting for her. It was peculiar to see Naruto sitting in the middle of the peak, his hands together forming a hand sign, bluish energy rolling off him like flames. What was rather comical was seeing Taliah clutching the ground like a lifeline, almost as if she was hugging the earth. "Land, I'll never leave you again," she heard the little girl say. She had to assume the daughter of Zeus was not a fan of Naruto's form of travel. "So, Taliah is not a fan of the way you travel by foot." Gunilla stated, "I can't blame her. You never knew the meaning of restraint." I'm surprised her hair managed to stay in shape. She patted the younger girl's hair down and took a seat on the ground beside her, looking out across the vast world of Jotunheim atop of the peak. "Are you giving them the signal?" "I am. It should only be a moment longer." The aura of chakra around Naruto increased for a split second, tripling in size and making the peak crack and rumble from the sudden intensity. A moment later, it cut off entirely, the aura around the blonde disappearing. That should do it. I imagine the first will be here within the next hour. The big blue eyes of Taliah looked up at him as he sat on her other side. "You still haven't told me who we're meeting. Why ruin the surprise?" Naruto replied to her, giving her a wink, and took off his backpack. "It's been a long day. I can't believe how quickly it flew by." Unzipping the top, he reached in and pulled out the thermos Hestia prepared for them. "How about a hot chocolate and a sandwich?" Taliah nodded and watched as her uncle took off the cap and poured the warm contents of the thermos into the lid. The scent of the chocolate quickly tickled her nose, and she couldn't help but hum in delight, taking it in her hands. She took a quick sip, and her shoulders slumped in joy. For most children, being at the top of a mountain would have been seen as the coolest thing in the world, but she wasn't one of them. She didn't like heights, and there was no way she was looking over the ledge. She didn't want to think about how she was getting down. She didn't fancy the idea of getting a piggyback from Naruto again. Once was enough for a lifetime. "What do you think Aunt Hestia is doing back home?" A thoughtful expression appeared on the blonde's face. "You know, I'm not sure. She's probably enjoying the peace and curled up in bed with a book." Uzumaki residence. "Oh, love ya, baby," the goddess of the hearth sang, still without clothes and holding a hairbrush in her right hand. Her shoulders shimmered one way, while her hips went another in rhythm with the song currently playing throughout the house. "Oh, love ya, baby." Jotunheim, yeah, you're probably right. Taliah agreed and hurriedly gobbled up one of the sandwiches sitting on a napkin in front of her. The young daughter of Zeus turned to Gunilla, who sat on her other side. "So, do you come to Jotunheim often?" The daughter of Thor shook her hand in the air. "Occasionally. Most of my duties pertain to Hotel Valhalla or Midgard. It's rare for me to visit the other worlds unless ordered to by Lord Odin." Being offered a sandwich, she graciously accepted. "Thank you." "So we just wait here?" Taliah asked. Naruto nodded. "That's right. We wait here until they arrive." "Olympus haul ass!" Hermes cried, running through the streets of Olympus and narrowly avoiding a lightning strike, scorching the ground and forcing all those in the nearby vicinity to run for cover. Everyone on Olympus knew something was off when the skies began to darken earlier that day, the air heavy with tension as they all looked upon the temple of Zeus that sat atop the peak. Rumors and whispers were quick to circulate, everyone throwing in their 2 drachma on what was causing Zeus's mood to sour, which only got worse as the day went on. Everyone, seek shelter where you can. No one needed to be told twice. Deities teleported away, returning to their temples, while nymphs and satyrs took refuge wherever they could find it. Hermes! A hand grabbed the collar of his uniform and felt his body get swung through the air, narrowly avoiding another strike of lightning. Rolling along the ground, Hermes inevitably came to a stop, pushing himself up and finding the person who inadvertently helped him from getting struck by lightning. Athena! Hermes cried, stepping forward and clutching the collar of her dress shirt. From the way the goddess of wisdom was dressed, one would think she'd just attended a business meeting, wearing a dark gray suit and heels. Thank the gods you're here. Hermes, what the hell is going on? Athena cried, her black hair whipping around her face as the wind started to pick up across Olympus. I don't know. None of us do. He pointed up the peak, towards the temple of Zeus where the storm was pulsating from. Everything was fine this morning, and then around noon, the storm appeared. It's just gotten bigger as the days went on. It's the worst I've seen in centuries. Hermes and Athena ducked as another stray bolt of lightning hurtled towards them. Grabbing her younger brother, Athena dragged him towards the nearest temple. In that case, it happened to be the golden monstrosity that belonged to Apollo. Banging on the doors, Athena yelled, "Apollo, we're coming in." She'd barely finished her sentence when the doors pushed open, offering them entrance. Bolting inside for safety, they closed with a heavy thud. Gods, this is worse than I thought. Come to think of it, where have you been? I haven't seen you all day. Hermes puffed out, his back to the doors. I was at a meeting for most of the day with the four winds. Irritation washed over her expression. Something our father was supposed to do, but informed me at the last minute to take his place. She held a hand in the air. Now I understand why. Apollo, damn you. Do you have any idea what's going on? Athena bellowed. She wanted answers. Clearly, the goddess of wisdom had missed something important. She didn't like not having an answer to a problem. And in this case, there was a giant red question mark hovering over her father. Well, both Athena and Hermes turned their heads, spotting a head of blonde hair poking out from behind one of the many golden statues the god of the sun kept of himself in the main foyer of the temple. It's only a guess, but I did see someone head towards Father's temple. 10 minutes later, this storm appeared over our heads. Who? Who could piss off our father this much? Hermes asked, recoiling in fright at another boom of thunder. He could actually feel the golden temple shake from the intensity. Apollo gulped, his hands gripping the golden posterior of his statue in comfort. Oh yeah, that'll do it. Hermes gulped. But what could she do that angered him to the point that he might destroy Olympus? Athena looked thoughtful, her heels tapping against the floor. I think that's the wrong question. Athena replied, drawing the attention of both her brothers. We shouldn't be asking what Hera's done to upset Zeus, but the reverse. What's our father done to upset his wife? All three children of Zeus looked at each other. It took less than a second for them to realize what the likely motive was for Hera's rage and why the thunderstorm was forming overhead. Each had a different reaction. Hermes facepalmed. Apollo shook his head while resting his forehead against the golden posterior of his statue, and Athena cursed in Greek, stamping her foot angrily against the floor. Her father was impossible. Jotunheim Talia knew something was approaching the moment. She heard her uncle and protector cease talking and watched his head snap up and look towards the sky. Next to her, Gunilla reacted moments later the same way, her blue eyes gazing up at the clouds. The two blondes pushed themselves to their feet, prompting Talia to do the same. Out of the 9, I shouldn't be surprised he's the first to arrive. He's always been the most punctual. Naruto spoke aloud, a hand coming to rest on Talia's shoulder. Are you ready to meet some people even older than I am? And a lot bigger? Talia asked, her face scrunching into a frown as Naruto and Gunilla focused on the sky. Doing the same, it wasn't long before the daughter of Zeus spotted what they were looking at. At first, it was a tiny black dot off in the distance, no bigger than her thumb. It was only as the seconds ran by did the object get bigger and bigger until Talia found her jaw dropping and eyes widening in disbelief. By the time the figure arrived before them, it dropped from the sky and impacted the earth with a shockwave that almost made Talia lose her footing. The only way the little daughter of Zeus could describe it was that of a giant beetle with 6 insect-like wings sprouting from a 7th tail, colored a pale green. It was bigger than anything Talia had ever seen. It was as big as a New York skyscraper and spied an orange glow coming from behind its armored face. The eyes, perhaps? 6 smaller arms with 3 on either side grew from its main body with horn-like protrusions sprouting from its shoulders. "Talia, I'd like you to meet Chome," Naruto introduced, smiling up at his old friend. He's known as one of the Bijou, or tailed beasts, as they're commonly known as. Chome is the 7-tailed beast. Naruto gave a small salute to the giant entity. "It's been a while, Chome." A distinct buzzing sound resonating from Chome began to cease, and Talia felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end when the enormous creature leaned forward until it stood barely a few meters from them. "Naruto," the voice called, surprising Talia and gaining a new look of wonder. The voice was deep, but there was a softness to the voice that the daughter of Zeus hadn't expected for one so giant. "You haven't visited us in some time. Where have you been?" "Ah, sorry about that, Chome. I've been a little occupied. I figured the Bijou wouldn't want me hounding them all the time, so I gave you guys some space." The blonde scratched the back of his head and chuckled. "Has everything been well?" Chome shrugged. "I can't complain, though that fool, Shikaku, is causing trouble again. Yeah, I heard. Ganilla came to Midgard and informed me what he was up to." Naruto replied. "Has Kurama or the other tailed beasts not tried to speak with him?" A loud grunt left the Bijou's mouth. "You'd have an easier time drawing water out of a stone if you think Kurama cares for anything the Tanuki does. All they do is bicker when they run into each other." Slowly, Talia felt the orange glow of Komiai's eyes shift and fall upon her. "Who's this?" Moving to stand behind Talia, both his hands steeled on her shoulders and gave her a pat. "This is Talia. She's a demigod, the daughter of Zeus. She came under my care 5 years ago, and I thought it would be a good chance to introduce her to everyone." A deep hum resonated from the Bijou. "Say hello, Talia." Gulping, Talia tried to steel her nerves. "Hello." She gave a short wave. "There's no need to feel uneasy, child. You are a friend of Naruto's, and therefore a friend of mine." Chome reassured and looked at Ganilla. "It's good to see you again, Ganilla. I hope you're keeping well." "The same to you, Lord Chome." A deep sigh escaped the Bijou. "I'm no lord, lest I need to always remind you." He then looked back to Talia. "You took another one in, huh, Naruto? I thought you kept to yourself these days with that little goddess following you around from time to time. Times change, I guess. That's the thing about immortality. Gives you plenty of time to think and adjust." Both turned their heads, and Talia looked off in the direction they were facing. Much like moments ago, a large figure made its way towards them, leaping from mountain to mountain with bluish hue engulfing their body. "Our next arrival. The rest will be here shortly," Naruto said, smiling as the Talia began to realize the next entity coming towards them was a giant cat, twin tails flickering from side to side. Uzumaki residence, knock knock knock, blinking in surprise. The quiet interior of Naruto's home was interrupted by a series of knocks at the front, alerting Hestia as she pushed herself up from the couch. Her peaceful night had been going blissfully. So well, in fact, she'd summoned a bottle of wine from her personal collection back from her temple on Olympus. She didn't indulge often, but for tonight, why not? Outside, the thunder had finally begun to cease, but was replaced by a heavy downfall of rain. Whatever was eating her younger brother all day seemed to be dying down, though it left the king of the gods in a melancholy-like state. She would leave him be for now, but if his mood continued to fester into tomorrow, she'd have no choice but to visit and ask what was bothering him. He could be so dramatic when he wanted to be. Humming to herself as she moved, she threw open the door, half expecting to find Naruto and Talia standing there. Instead, she was visibly taken aback by who stood on the other side. She was drenched from head to foot, her dark hair matted to her forehead and her chitin sticking to her like a second skin. An emotionless expression masked her face, her eyes lacking its usual fire. "Hera," Hestia spoke, unease laced at her voice. "What are you doing here?" Hera started, but her voice was stuck in her throat. It took a moment to gather herself before anything came out. "I wasn't sure where to go. I looked for Mother, but she's gone off the grid again." Her expression turned pained, her lip trembling. I know you spend most of the time here. I didn't know where to go. Hey, Hestia closed the distance and wrapped her up in a hug. It's okay. She felt her sister sob into her shoulder. Just tell me what happened. Something happened with Zeus? It would explain the crazy weather over the city. She felt her sister nod against her shoulder. She heard her sister mumble something, but Hestia couldn't make out her words. I'm sorry, Hera, but what did you say? Hera lifted her head and spoke the words Hestia never imagined her sister would ever say. I left him, Hestia. I left him for good. My marriage with Zeus is over. Hestia wasn't sure how long she was standing there looking at her sister. The only thing that came out was a word she very rarely used. Oh, fuck. Part 21, of course. He was the last one to arrive, but then again, Kurama was never the most punctual of the Bijou. Ground shaking as he moved and tails narrowly avoiding mountains as he lumbered towards their meeting location. Naruto tilted his head up at his old partner. He looked the same as he always did, wearing his usual bored expression that could have given Shikamaru a run for his money. Those two would have been good friends if his role as a Jinchuriki had been reversed with Inara. Granted, nothing would ever get done with the pair staring at clouds all day, but still. When the fox finally came to a halt, he let out a loud yawn, strong enough to sweep away nearby clouds into oblivion and scratch the back of his head. It's about time you stopped by, Brad. Kurama's voice was deep, hitting a low octave that would send shivers down the backs of those without their courage. I'm nearly 6,000 years old. I don't think I can be classed as a brat anymore. If anything, I'm an old man. The blonde shrugged and held out his fist towards the strongest member of the nine. Then again, you're even older than I am. If I'm an old man, what does that make you? Irritated, because you woke me up from my nap earlier. Message ahead, next time. Kurama moved his neck from side to side, loud cracks, reminiscent of thunder, echoing across the land. You know I can't talk to you in our shared mindscape when we're in two different worlds. The mountain-sized fox snorted but lifted his fist and met Naruto's in the middle, their bond reconnecting after decades apart. Good to see you again, buddy. You too, Kurama replied, a rare tone of sincerity in his voice before asking. You're here to prevent that idiot from going too far? Yeah, Naruto sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I got word from Ganilla that Shikaku has been pushing his luck recently. He's taken over Utgard Loki's palace? When did this happen? Kurama shrugged. About a fortnight ago. Shikaku kicked him and his cronies out, and they came running to Sun for help. As far as I heard, Sun couldn't convince the idiot to leave and let the Jotuns be. Naruto turned and looked at the enormous form of the four-tailed beast, his crimson hair displaying a sheen courtesy of the Jotunheim sun. Is that true, son? The great Bijou blinked and turned his head to look down at Naruto, pausing his conversation with Ganilla. What's that? Kurama said you tried to talk Shikaku out of Utgard Loki's palace. Is that true? Sun hummed, nodding his head. That's right. I did what I could, but Shikaku refused. He's grown bored in the last century and regularly tries to pick fights with the Jotuns. Most won't go near him, though. A rare few try their luck with little success. His enormous hand scratched beneath his chin. Utgard Loki has been less than pleased by the disruption. He may try to make a move against Shikaku, though. I doubt it would do much good. What a pain in the ass, Naruto muttered. Shikaku had never been the easiest-tailed beast to get along with. The enormous calamity of chakra and sand loved pushing people's buttons and goading them into a fight. In a way, he was a battle maniac, but it was only ever to sate his boredom. It was no wonder Sunagakure had so many problems with him back in the day. Things got better once the Fourth War ended and he and Gaara struck up their unlikely friendship, but there was always a fear Shikaku might resort back to his old ways. He would have to talk with Shikaku and get him to leave Utgard Loki's palace peacefully. Above them, the once blue sky of Jotunheim was beginning to darken, colors of red, orange, and yellow washing over as night began to rear its head. It wouldn't be long until the stars were out. Unlike Earth, where light pollution from humanity had obscured the stars, making them impossible to see, it was not the same for Jotunheim. Thousands of tiny silver dots would be visible, like tiny lights on a black canvas, forming different shapes and patterns. We'll go talk to him tomorrow. Hopefully we can coax him out, Naruto told the two, where are Utgard Loki and the other giants residing at the moment. In the forest just outside the palace. I think they're hoping Shikaku will get bored and leave on his own volition. Sun replied, with Kurama snorting in amusement. Clearly, they don't know our brother the same way we do. Probably need to see him first then. Naruto put his hands in his pockets and felt a chill run over him as he felt the temperature begin to decline. Best you guys come with me in the morning. I can handle Shikaku, but I'd rather have company. Strength in numbers and all that. I don't want to take any chances with Talia around. Speaking of said girl, you're so warm and fluffy. I could stay like this forever, Talia voiced. The front part of her body was resting against the paw of the two tails, arms spread wide, and putting her whole body weight against the flamed fur. Said tailed beast didn't appear to mind. Rather, she seemed highly amused by the actions of the daughter of Zeus, watching curiously as Talia's face nuzzled against her. I could stay like this forever. You are a most peculiar human. Even Ganilla was not as overly friendly and familiar when she first met us. She wasn't. Talia's big blue eyes stared up at the mismatched pair of Matatabis. Despite the giant cat's body being made of blue fire, the flames didn't hurt her at all. She had a hard time believing it when Matatabi sat down next to her, towering over her like a mountain. It took some convincing and a brief demonstration by Ganilla after the Valkyrie put her hand on the enormous paw for Talia to give it a try herself. Oh no, she was so defiant. The two tails explained she would puff out her chest and announce to everyone that she was the daughter of thunder and that she would bring out heads to her father as tribute. The cat laughed. Her face would go all red and she'd stomp her feet around in a tantrum when we ignored her. She tried to come across as threatening, but all it did for her was appear cute. Ganilla, who was in earshot of the conversation, blushed from embarrassment. That was hundreds of years ago. A lot has changed since then. I remember once she challenged Saiken to a duel, and in response, Saiken created a bubble around her and left her to float away through the sky. It was hours by the time she came down and returned to land. A deep laugh escaped the bijou. The picture in Talia's head that formed made the little girl laugh voraciously. It was hard to picture Ganilla, this large, beautiful, and strong person once being tiny and being trapped in a bubble of all things. We could recreate the moment. The voice of Saiken joined in the conversation, his two beady eyes staring down at Ganilla with a tilt to them. It would take only a moment. No thankayu. Saiken shrugged, his tail swishing in the air and causing the forest behind him to tilt back and forth like a pendulum. I could try with you. He looked directly at Talia, who nervously shook her head and buried her face in a Matatabi's paw. Did I say something wrong? Talia has a fear of heights, Ganilla revealed, watching as the enormous head of Matatabi lowered down to nuzzle against the young daughter of Zeus, seemingly making any fear she had from ending up in a bubble many feet off the ground melt away. The bijou that were listening all appeared surprised. I know. It's ironic, given she's a daughter of the Greek god of the sky. Irony sure can be a bastard when it wants to be, Gyuki added, shuffling over beside his siblings, only to find his face momentarily engulfed in bluish flames. Shaking his head as the flames quickly dissipated, though a stinging sensation remained, he found his sister looking at him with annoyance on her feline face. What was that for? Mind your language. Don't curse with her around. She doesn't need to hear that kind of vulgar talk. Mismatched eyes bore a hole into Gyuki. The last thing anyone needs is for her to start swearing like Shikaku. I won't have it. Someone's a little protective already, Saiken muttered to Chome. The Seven Tails merely nodded his head. Ignore those fools, Talia. You just stay innocent and sweet. Matatabi encouraged, appearing delighted as Talia nodded her head and snuggled closer to the large feline. She was growing rather fond of the little demigod, even quicker than the time she'd met the daughter of Thor. New York City, this wasn't her bed. That was the first thing she'd thought about when her eyes finally opened from an exhausting night of falling in and out of sleep. She wasn't sure when her sister had moved her from the front of the house after turning up as a sobbing mess. but Hestia had somehow worked her out of her soaked chitin and into a pair of comfortable pajamas. Normally, her choice of attire for bed was a night dress of varying lengths, but she'd only worn those out of the request for her husband. Nimble fingers running across the top of the covers. The brown eyes of the goddess of marriage stared aimlessly at the ceiling. Arms and legs spread out like a starfish. One foot hung over the side of the bed, hair swept down one side in a mess of ringlets and frizz. She didn't dare look at herself in the mirror. With her blotchy red eyes and messy hair, she must have looked a mess. Far from the perfect queen she always tried to present herself to be. I'm not a queen anymore, though, she thought to herself. It was a realization she hadn't had until that morning. 5,000 years as queen, down the drain. The events of the day before were fresh in her memory. The day started as well as any other, spending the morning in her gardens, tending to the plants and the animals she allowed to call their home. Roses were some of her favorites, and at the back of the garden was a beautiful bush of peach-colored roses she continued to fawn over even after all these centuries. They'd been a gift from Zeus and one she treasured. Any gift from her husband she treasured and held close to her heart. His gifts over the years had been numerous, beyond the capability of counting, but the roses were one of her favorites. She took special care of them. Former husband. When she thought her day would continue to grow better and better, Aphrodite had skipped into her garden and whispered some gossip she'd heard from the nymphs that routinely tended to her. A rumor she heard one too often and ended up coming true. Her blood froze, and her joy turned into an ice-cold fury. How quickly a good day could turn into a bad one. Zeus had fathered another demigod, a mortal woman. Zeus had fathered another demigod with the same mortal woman from last time. She and Zeus had fought many times before, but rarely had they come to blows. If she was blunt, it took a major fuck-up for such a thing to happen, but for the first time in a very long time, Hera could say she truly lost it. All the anger, the frustration, the pain, the sorrow. It all came out, and once the pressure valve on that container was released, there was no way it was being sealed until the contents were gone. Zeus was in the wrong, and he took her blows, all the while the weather across New York spiraled into a storm of epic proportions. It was hours later after she screamed until her voice became hoarse and her throat began to sting, that she'd thrown the final blow his way. This one wasn't physical, but verbal, and it did the most damage. We're done. Our marriage is over. After that, she teleported away in bright golden light. The last image of her husband was his body sinking to its knees, his face stunned in a way she'd never seen before. An expression that would forever be cemented in her mind. Afterwards, she tried to find her mother, but in typical Rhea fashion, she was nowhere to be found. So, she went to the next best person, and under the roof of the one place, Zeus would never think to look for her. Hello world, there's a song that we're singing. Hera blinked and readily pushed herself up into a sitting position as the sound of music from the floor beneath her started playing. Looking to the side and towards the alarm clock stationed on the bedside cabinet, it read 9:04 a.m. That was a lie-in for the goddess, who usually got up around the crack of dawn to enjoy the sunrise and get a start on her day. Hestia had most likely been up for a while and left her to sleep in. The music was undoubtedly her attempt at telling her younger sister that she'd slept enough and now it was time to get up. Not wanting to be scolded by the elder goddess, Hera threw the duvet off her body and steadily stood up and grabbed the fluffy purple night robe hanging from the door. Next to her bed, a pair of slippers were sitting with Hera, soundlessly slipping her feet inside before making her way out of the bedroom. Walking down the staircase, Hera couldn't help but stop every few steps. The wall on the left was filled with framed photographs of all shapes and sizes. Many looked modern with her sister present in most of them. 3 people were usually present, each with a young-looking blonde man who she assumed was the one known as Naruto and Zeus's mortal daughter. One look at the girl, and she could see her husband on her face. It wasn't just the blue eyes, but the shape of them too, as well as the nose. One picture was of the 3 of them sitting on the Bethesda fountain in Central Park, a cone of ice cream in their hands, and smiling at the camera. The one next to it was the same trio, but Talia was being held in one of the blonde's arms. Her face indicated she was half asleep, and Hestia had one hand resting on her back and forehead gently pressed against her niece's. She spied one with Naruto and Talia sitting next to a Christmas tree, presents and wrapping paper everywhere. There were even a few with only Hestia and Talia, the most prominent being the one where both goddess and demigod had their backs to the camera and stood over the kitchen counter. A large mixing bowl was between them with Hestia's hands working whatever ingredients were inside, while Talia, standing on a kitchen stool, was looking up at her in wonder. Hera wasn't sure how long she was standing there. A couple of minutes at the most, if the song in the background changing was a telling sign, but she simply couldn't bring herself to look away. Her eyes gained a familiar sheen to them. They looked like a family, she thought, and felt a lump begin to appear in her throat. Her sister, the one that swore to never marry nor have any children, had a version of exactly that. Sure, the blonde man wasn't her husband, nor were they romantically involved, but the way they appeared in the photos didn't portray that. The photos portrayed a husband and wife showering their daughter with love. It was the perfect little family unit. She didn't want to feel bitter or jealous, but the feeling wove its way in there anyway. Which one are you looking at? She snapped out of her thoughts and looked towards the bottom of the stairs. Hestia stood there with one hand on the banister, dressed in similar attire to herself with her long hair swept down one side in a ponytail. Thinking quickly, she pointed to a picture, though didn't know which one. Hestia climbed the stairs and stopped on the step next to her and smiled when she saw the photograph. The picture featured Naruto and a 6-year-old Talia sitting on the beach, a bucket and spade in Naruto's hand as they attempted to build a sandcastle. A look of concentration was worn on the little girl's face, while the blonde was smiling. Hestia hummed contently. I remember that day well. Her mouth widened and turned into a smile. That was a good day. One of her hands gently gasped Hera's elbow. Come on, let's go have some breakfast. Hera didn't say anything, though she did nod and allowed her sister to gently guide her down the stairs. She looked over her shoulder and took one last look at the pictures on the wall before they disappeared from view. Hestia had prepared a full spread for them, laid out across the table with care and precision. She spied toast, bacon, scrambled eggs, numerous condiments, pancakes, waffles, and even a plate of hash browns. One would think Hestia had cooked for a small army or the men of their family. Taking a seat, she wordlessly looked across the table and started putting a little bit of everything on her plate. How did you sleep? Hestia asked, taking the seat opposite her sister and copying her actions. The bed was to your liking? The bed was fine. I slept as much as I could, given the circumstances. Plate full, she picked up her fork and plucked away at the food, taking a little bit at a time. As expected, it was delicious. Hestia nodded and poured herself a glass of orange juice. That's good. Deciding not to beat around the bush, Hestia had to ask the glaring question. So, what's the plan now? The plan. Hestia gave her sister a look. Hera, don't play dumb. It doesn't suit you. Hera swallowed a bite of her scrambled egg before answering. The plan. I don't know. I don't have one. Rhea briefly appeared in her mind. My initial goal after leaving Olympus was to find Mother, but she's gone off the map again. I don't know where she's gone, so I came here. Beneath the table, one of her legs jittered and her foot tapped against the floor. I didn't know where else to go. I couldn't go back to Olympus. Then, I remembered you spend most of your time here. A thought crossed her mind. Is it just you? Where is that Naruto person and Dash? She paused as she tried to say the girl's name out loud. Talia. Hestia reminded her, giving her sister a look. Her name is Talia. Hera made a face before it returned to being neutral and unsure. Yes, Talia. She clicked her tongue. Speaking of, where's the girl? I haven't seen or heard a peep from her or this Naruto since I've been here. Naruto and Talia are currently away for the weekend. They should be back either later today or tomorrow. Hestia leveled a concerning look towards Hera. If they were here, I'm not sure I would have allowed you to come in. Your emotional state was a mess when you arrived. Hera knew she should have been offended, but her sister was wrong. She wouldn't openly harm the girl, despite how much she loathed the fact she existed, but her emotional state from the night before had left her hanging by a thread. If she had seen the girl, who knew what might have happened? Do you want me to leave? No. Hestia replied with sparsely a moment between the question and the answer. You are my sister and I love you. I will support you and help you in whatever way that I can. You can stay here, but I don't know for how long. If it was just Naruto and I living here, it wouldn't be a problem. He would welcome you regardless. But it's not just the two of you living here. No, it's not. This is Talia's home, and I won't put her at risk. You don't trust me when it comes to my niece. No, I don't. Hestia leveled a look at her sister. Your record with the children of Zeus isn't stellar, Hera. You have to understand that you've done some terrible things to children who had no control over their birth and who sired them. Hestia brought her glass to her lips. You can wait until Naruto returns, or you can make your way before. It's up to you, but you know what my stance on the matter is. Hera nodded. Fair enough. A hand reached from across the table and patted the top of her own, her elder sister smiling at her. I will help you through this, sister. I promise. Warmth spread through her body, and the former queen of Olympus couldn't help but close her eyes and smile. I know you will. Thank you, Hestia. The two settled into their breakfast, the younger goddess enjoying the fruits of Hestia's morning labor. By the way, Demeter will be coming over shortly. Cutlery clanged against the table, and a groan escaped the goddess of marriage. Why? Jotunheim, I don't care what you have to do. Just get him out of my palace, and as far away from my lands as possible. The voice of Utgard Loki was leaving little room to argue, as the blonde shinobi felt the giant's gaze leer down at him. Normally, the giant was fairly laid back and confident, but having been kicked out of his home by Shikaku for over a week, his patience was beginning to fray. It was understandable. He wouldn't like it if he was kicked out of his home, either. I'm Utgard Loki. I shouldn't have to deal with this shit. A deep hiss came from behind Naruto that made Utgard Loki flinch, resonating from the mouth of the Matatabi. Language. She glared at Utgard Loki, not wishing for Talia to hear such language coming from his mouth. Said girl was resting next to one of Matatabi's paws, her last sandwich that her aunt had packed for her in her hands. The demigod/bijou pair had stuck close together since their meeting, with Matatabi taking it upon herself to keep an eye on a young girl while Naruto dealt with her wayward brother. The blonde shinobi put his hands up and placated the giant. I will get him out of your place. I'll give you my word. You'd better. None of this would be happening if you didn't send these damn creatures to Jotunheim. Damn you and damn Odin for allowing it. A short distance away from Naruto and Utgard Loki, Kurama opened one eye as he lazily sat on his side. Keep talking. See where it lands you. As if to prove his point, he showed off his pearly white teeth, each one as big as a person. One less giant around here might make it more peaceful. The most powerful sorcerer native to Jotunheim gave Naruto a look before stalking off to join a small band of giants, who clustered together in a group a sizable distance away from the gathered tailed beasts. The giants and tailed beasts preferred to keep separate company, which was of little concern to the nine. Initially, upon their arrival to Jotunheim, some of the more presumptuous and egotistical Jotuns thought it would be a good idea to try and bend the bijou to their whims and desires. Utgard Loki had been at the forefront of that movement. Naturally, things didn't go as planned when they realized how powerful said beasts were, and the Jotuns were sent running with their tails between their legs. Some still tried it, but the result was always the same. After their early years of having the likes of Hashirama and Madara to contend with, the Jotuns of Jotunheim were of little concern. Boy, he sure hasn't changed his tune after all these years, has he? Naruto commented, watching as Utgard Loki joined his fellow giants and sent a collective glare his way. They've never enjoyed our presence here, but they wouldn't dare go against Odin. Kurama told them. It's a love-hate relationship at best between the Bijou and Jotuns. No doubt they'd like to see the back of us. Let's see how this meeting with Shikaka goes, and maybe that won't be a reality. Naruto took a deep breath and looked over his shoulder. Matatabi, please look after Talia for me. This shouldn't take long. Shall do. All right, let's get this show on the road. He looked to Kurama and Son. Let's head in. The palace of Utgard Loki didn't look like much of a palace. In truth, on the outside, it resembled a wooden shack with the key difference being its sheer size. It ran so high in the air it dwarfed even the bijou, who was off a height with the front door. To Naruto, he must have resembled an ant walking through the door of a human home. The inside, however, was completely different. With Kurama pushing the door wide open, the inside resembled a supersized bowling alley that stretched on for miles. Couches and lazy boy chairs dotted the landscape, each one the size of a New York apartment complex. Chips the size of cars dotted the floor with streaks of old melted cheese and jalapenos scattered everywhere. It looked like Utgard Loki had been having a boys' party when Shikaka knocked on the door and kicked them out. Sun wrinkled his nose as they made their way through. It smells awful in here. His red fur bristled as his hand rubbed his nostrils. Well, Jotuns aren't known for their hygiene. At least, not the ones I've met. Clang woohoo baby. Strike. I know that voice, Naruto replied, looking off in the direction the voice came from. Pushing chakra into his feet, he jumped high into the air and dashed across the top of the couch and tables until he found himself standing at the opening of Utgard Loki's bowling alley. Standing in front of one of the mile-long alleys with bus-sized pins toppled on their sides was none other than the one-tailed tanuki he was looking for. Like the rest of the 9, he didn't look any different than the last time he'd seen him. A large bowl of nachos was grasped in his long tail, and every so often was dipped in by the bijou. Shikaku! Shikaku, what are you doing? Mid-swing, Shikaku turned around and groaned when he saw his 2 elder brothers and the Jinchuriki that once housed all of them. No. Why are you here? Don't spoil my fun. Go away. Stop acting like a child, Shikaku. You should have known Naruto would be summoned here eventually. Sun told him, shaking his head disapprovingly. Give the Jotuns their home back. No. Why should I? It's not my fault they couldn't hold on to it. It's their fault for being too weak. We agreed to give each other space and not poke our nose into the other side's business. I have no desire to relocate because of your nonsense. But I'm bored all the time. That's not our fault. Sun roared back, causing Naruto to sigh and shake his head. Shikaku, out of all of the bijou, could be notoriously difficult to reason with. Not to mention, he grew bored far too easily. He was like a child in a sense. You give him a new toy, he'd play with it for a few days, and then look elsewhere for something else to play with. Jotunheim had been the best option for the tailed beasts, and initially, none of them had any issues with calling the realm their new home. All 9 had their section of the world that was theirs and used it how they saw fit. However, over time, the only one who began to grow restless was Shikaku. As great as the peaceful setting was, it could be sourly boring for someone such as the One-Tail and spend the next few centuries poking and prodding the locals. Shikaku, you have to give them their home back. Naruto reiterated what Sun said. But I'm so bored. Shikaku groaned, dropping the enormous bowling ball in his hand and letting it roll across the ground. You have no idea. It's been torture. Kurama let out a snort, causing Shikaku to whip his head in his direction with a scowl on his face. You got something you want to say, for ball? The ruby eyes of the 9-tailed fox narrowed. I was merely thinking how you're still a whiny Neanderthal after all these millennia. Kurama let out a long, drawn-out exhale. Once a whiny bitch, always a whiny bitch. You take that back. I'd rather eat stones. That can be arranged. Naruto sighed and palmed his face. Maybe bringing Kurama with him wasn't the best laid-out plan. 9 and 1 were known to openly antagonize each other, with Shikaku acting out something that Kurama labeled as stupid. They were like oil and water, chalk and cheese. Poking fun at the other was like breathing for them. Shikaku would get wound up, and Kurama would merely act like he doesn't care. Shikaku, Naruto shouted, drawing the bijou's attention to him. I know you don't have much patience and you're easily distracted, but you can't barge into someone's home and kick them out. You have to leave, otherwise there's going to be serious repercussions. Oda may decide it's time for you to leave and go elsewhere. A loud humph escaped Shikaku and crossed his arms. Then I'll go. Anything's better than this boring world. His tail swung back and forth. Maybe send me to that fire world or the one made of ice. I'll have fun fighting the idiots that live there. Naruto palmed his face. That's the last thing we need. Stop trying to pick fights, you fool. Sun spoke once again, marching up to his brother and getting in his face. Can't you see reason for once? You're not a child anymore. He hasn't been a child for millennia, Kurama added. He didn't bother looking in the direction of Shikaku. The bloated sand tanuki was an eyesore. Instead, he stared at the ugly decor that covered the walls of the interior of Utgard Loki's home. Were all the Jotuns' homes this ugly? I will drag you out of here if I have to. I like to see you try. Go pick your damn fleas. Hearing enough, Naruto took his bag off his back and unzipped the top. Reaching inside, he pulled out a moderately sized tea kettle and held it out in the palm of his hand. Coughing, he drew Shikaku's attention and watched as the bijou went bug-eyed at the small device. Why do you have that with you? If you don't leave here willingly, I'll be forced to open the lid and seal you back inside. The Shining told him, giving him a look that told Shikaku he wasn't bluffing. You wouldn't. You want to bet. You don't have the stones to put me in there. You don't know me very well. Shikaku puffed out his chest. You fools won't let me have any fun. You'll have to take me kicking and screaming. He grabbed another bowling ball with his tail and threw it in their direction, only for Kurama to catch it with one of his own. Shut him up already, before I make him. His voice is beginning to grate on my nerves. Kurama told him, receiving a nod from his old partner. Naruto jangled the teapot in front of Shikaku and gave him one final warning. Well, what's it going to be? The reply he got was the bijou blowing a raspberry in his direction. Fine. You asked for this. He removed the lid of the teapot and watched as Shikaku instantly began to regret his decision. 5 minutes later, the group of bijou and demigods watched as the door to Utgard Loki's home swung back open and noticed Naruto, Kurama, and Sun making their way back over to them. At first, the group of 8 tilted their heads in confusion when they noticed a certain tanuki was missing from their group. The silence didn't last long, though, as a loud laugh from Gyuki caught them off guard and watched as he pointed towards the blonde shinobi. As soon as the other bijou realized what had happened, they started laughing as well. Talia asked, frowning and looking towards Ganilla for an answer. Why are they laughing? You'll understand in a moment. The older demigoddess answered before looking at her approaching mentor. You had to use the tea kettle. Naruto nodded. He wasn't leaving me with a choice. He was extremely stubborn. The last thing I wanted to happen was Shikaku scrapping it out with another member of the 9. That just leads to unnecessary destruction. He ushered Talia forward. Talia, there's someone I'd like you to meet. The daughter of Zeus watched as Naruto placed the tea kettle on the ground and gave the top of the lid a few taps. Come out and say hello, Shikaku. A low rumble came from inside the kettle as Talia knelt in front of it. She didn't have to wait long as a small beige-colored head appeared beneath the lid, soon followed by a pair of tiny arms and legs and finally, a long tail. The smaller version of Shikaku looked significantly cartoonish compared to his titanic state, barely reaching up to the blonde's knees. He didn't appear pleased by his current situation and looked one thread away from losing his mind as his siblings laughed around him. I hate this so much. Naruto shrugged. You've only got yourself to blame. I did warn you. Shikaku's pride would always be his downfall. Shikaku, this is Talia. Talia, this is Shikaku. The reason we came to Jotunheim. Shikaku looked up at the little girl, who was staring wonders at him, and then looked back at Naruto. Who the fuck's this? Naruto was about to answer, but found the gigantic face of Matatabi suddenly appearing next to him, giving Shikaku a look that promised death. Cuss in front of her again. I'll end you. Shikaku's face contorted. You can't tell me what to do. His tail poked upwards towards his sister. Fuck. 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 Naruto shook his head while Talia laughed, her giggles causing Shikaku to turn around and face her. He's funny, uncle. Shikaku blinked, mildly surprised that the young girl found his cussing amusing. Funny, huh? I could work with that. You want to learn some cool words? I got a lot more stored up you'll love. His mouth turned into a grin, while Matatabi looked downright horrified. Here's a good one to know. Someone messes with you. You just call them a CU dash, and that's enough out of you. The lid to the kettle slammed back down, causing the tiny bijou's head to disappear along with the rest of his limbs. Hestia finds out about this. I'll be a dead man. He stood back up and made his way over to Utgard Loki and his giants. Shikaku has been removed. I'm returning your home to you. A grunt left the giant king, though no words left his lips. He merely looked down at Naruto, then to the tea kettle, and then back to Naruto. After a short stare down, Utgard Loki merely turned, followed after his fellow giants, and disappeared back into the house, slamming the door shut behind him. The blonde sighed, thankful the Jotun king didn't decide to take things physical. It wouldn't have ended well for the Jotuns. Now, he had to figure out what to do with Shikaku. My poor baby sister. Come to big sister. Let her push away whatever negative feelings you have. An exaggerated voice echoed through the Uzumaki household. The neutral face of the goddess of marriage could do little, as the side of her face found itself resting against the bountiful chest of her sister. A few steps away, Hestia leaned against the wall, staring in amusement as the goddess of agriculture fussed over their younger sister. The best way to describe her sister was a combination of Aphrodite and Athena. 1 minute meant she could be a cool and collected goddess who was all business. The next minute, she'd be all smiles and acting like the perfect mom and trying to mother everyone. Of the three of them, she was by far the most free-spirited, enjoying the splendors of life and not above lying with mortals. She loved her sister, but she could be too much sometimes. Please, let go of me, Hera muttered, trying to fight against her sister's grip. I couldn't believe it when I heard. I never thought you'd find a Go Jones to leave that bum. But look at you. You did just that. Demeter sighed. I love our brother, but he's not what I'd call husband material. I did warn you all those millennia ago what would happen. Demeter released Hera from her grip. Hestia too, if I remember right. I don't think now is the time to be saying such things, sister, Hestia replied, giving her middle sister a look when she nonchalantly kicked her shoes off to the side. Yes, yes, of course. Demeter waved off before putting her arm around Hera's shoulders. Jokes aside, are you all right? A concerned expression appeared on the goddess's face. I tried to find you, but it's pretty hard when you cloak yourself. I wouldn't have found you if Hestia didn't inform me you were with her. Here, of all places. Hera shrugged, as well as someone can be after separating from their husband of 5 millennia. I don't know how to describe it, other than feeling numb all over. Hera pursed her lips. It's like I put all this effort into making our marriage work and finally having the realization that it was all for nothing. I had this moment of clarity when I was screaming at him that years of being faithful and loving were all going nowhere. Demeter gripped her shoulder tighter. Well, I hate to say I told you so. She got a glare in response from her younger sister, but I won't. I'm surprised to see you out of bed, though. You're taking this way better than Zeus is. You've seen him. Demeter shrugged as Hestia led them all into the living room, where a silver tray sat waiting for them with a freshly boiled pot of tea ready. I have. How is he? Not great. Spent the rest of the night moping around his temple. This morning he was just lying in his bed despondent. I think Apollo and Hermes tried to rouse him, but got bolts of lightning thrown their way. Hestia poured the tea. It might be best to leave him be for a while you, she looked at Hera, keep a low profile. I know. I've already decided I'll be staying clear of Olympus for a little while. Hera pursed her lips. Once Mother lifts her circle of privacy, I'll go and stay with her. Until then, she turned to look at Hestia, which in turn was copied by Demeter. Oh, you're going to be staying with Hestia and her boy toy? He's not my boy toy, and he's older than I am. Still, Demeter leaned over with one hand, resting against the cushions of the couch. I've seen him from afar, and he's such a hunky dish. It's no wonder Aphrodite has been pining after him. Demeter's hair shimmered in soft waves. Maybe I should take a crack at him. I'd warmly welcome him to my bedroom. Can we please not talk about who you'd welcome to your bed? Hestia replied. You've been spending too much time with Aphrodite. She's rubbing off on you. Demeter shrugged. Hey, we're all women here. Men aren't the only ones who have needs. She looked at Hera. Who knows? Maybe now that you're not married, you should take a shot. Hera gave her a look. What? You're single now. You're not breaking any vows. Live a little and show some lucky mortal the goods you're hiding behind those clothes. She pinched the fabric of Hera's gown, only to get swatted away by the said goddess. I'll pass. I'm not looking to jump from one marriage to another. Hera fell back, her shoulders engulfed by the couch as she sank into its warm embrace. Right now, all I want is something to cheer me up and not think about my failure of a marriage with Zeus. She gave her sister a dry look. Any ideas? Or did you just come here to make fun of me at my expense? Oh, I have a few ideas. An hour later, I have to admit, I was rather dubious of this idea, Hera said. Her mug of tea was long gone, and in its place was a long cocktail with a pineapple wedge hanging from the rim. A pink straw rested inside, connecting to the goddess's mouth. But this does make me feel better. I told you, Demeter said smugly, holding her cocktail in her hand, before she leaned forward. Don't believe him, honey. He's only going to bed you and leave you high and dry. At the other end of the couch, Hestia could only release another sigh. It felt like all she'd been doing was sighing today. I can't believe I let you talk me into this. The three goddesses were all sitting on the couch, ankles crossed and resting against the coffee table with cocktails in their hands, all the while dressed in wedding gowns. Each had gone with a separate design, from the more conservative Hestia to openly flaunting her curves in Demeter. Hera, meanwhile, favored a more classy kind, which towed the line between the two. On the television was one of those trashy reality shows Aphrodite was obsessed with. Don't deny it, sister. You're enjoying this, Demeter replied, giving her sister a look. Hestia's facade lasted a moment before a look of acceptance appeared. I'm enjoying the company. Sure, whatever you say. Demeter's mouth turned into a smirk. You know, you look good in a wedding dress, sister. Hera silenced them both before Hestia could say anything. He's making a move. Minutes later, all three were shouting at the television, all the while leaning back in the seats and taking a long swig of the cocktails. There is little more the goddess of marriage could ask for than quality time with her sisters to help her through the most challenging time in her life for many millennia.